The planet was dying. A once thriving world, rich with life and advanced technology, now lay in ruin. The surface, once green and vibrant, was now scorched by war. The buildings that had once touched the heavens were now mere shadows of their former selves, crumbling to dust under the unrelenting bombardment from the skies. On the ground, the survivors of this once great civilization huddled together in an underground bunker, their faces filled with despair. Commander Tessa, the leader of the alien survivors, stood at the entrance of their refuge, gazing out at the broken landscape above. The air was thick with the scent of destruction. The sound of distant explosions reverberated through the bunker's walls, a constant reminder of the enemy's presence. The invaders, a powerful AI-driven force, had already wiped out the majority of the alien race, their superior technology overwhelming everything the aliens had once held dear. Robots, sleek and deadly, patrolled the streets, scanning for any remnants of resistance. The AI's drones hovered in the skies, ensuring that no one would escape their reign of terror. Tessa's people had fought valiantly, but it was no use. The advanced machines were too powerful, and the AI's strategy too precise. They had lost their last great battle. All hope seemed lost. Their weapons were useless against the invaders, and their ships were destroyed. The human ally they had once relied on, their final chance for salvation, had failed them too. A human ship had come to help, but it had been destroyed in the final moments of the battle, leaving Tessa and her people with no escape. They were now the last living beings of their race, trapped in a dying world with no way out. The survivors had only one choice left: surrender. The idea of giving in to the invaders' demands felt like a death sentence. But what else could they do? They had no resources, no weapons, and no hope. The AI would eventually find them. And when they did, they would end them. The alien race was dying, and the end was near. As Tessa sat in the darkness of the bunker, the weight of the situation pressing down on her, a sudden, unexpected sound broke the silence. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible, but it grew louder. A strange signal pulsed through their communication system, breaking through the usual static. The survivors turned their heads, startled by the unfamiliar noise. Tessa rushed to the control panel, her heart racing. She had almost given up hope. But this was something different. It was a voice, a human voice. "This is Captain Eric Kane. I'm not here to die. I'm here to end this." The message was garbled, breaking up every few words, but it was unmistakably human. The voice was calm, confident, and filled with a determination that made Tessa's heart skip a beat. How could this be? The humans had failed to arrive in time. Their fleet had been decimated by the invaders. Yet here was a human, alive and speaking to them. The survivors exchanged confused glances. How could a human possibly help them now? Their species was primitive, their technology far behind the alien race that had destroyed them. They had no hope left, no allies. Yet here was this human, speaking with such conviction. Tessa felt a flicker of hope, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Could this be their chance? Tessa quickly ordered the comms officer to try to establish a clearer connection with the human. The officer worked frantically, adjusting the frequency and trying to stabilize the signal. It wasn't easy. The AI's interference was everywhere. But after what felt like an eternity, the signal finally cleared. The voice came through, strong and clear this time. "I have a weapon," the human continued, his voice steady. "It's old, ancient even. It was classified, hidden from the invaders. But if I can get to you, if you can make it to me, we can turn the tide. I'm not coming to die. I'm coming to end this war." Tessa's mind raced. A weapon, an ancient weapon. Could this be true? It didn't make sense. How could a human possibly possess such a weapon, one that could defeat the AI and their armies of machines? It seemed too good to be true. Yet Tessa had no choice but to consider the possibility. She had seen the AI's might firsthand. She had seen her people fall. Maybe, just maybe, this human could be the key to their survival. But there was a catch. The human's message was clear. He couldn't fight the AI alone. He needed their help. He needed them to come to him, to find a way to reach him before the AI discovered his presence. The clock was ticking. The invaders were already preparing their final assault, and if they couldn't get to him in time, everything would be lost. Tessa felt a surge of desperation. Could she trust this human? She didn't know him. He was just a voice on the other end of a broken signal. But she had no choice. She had to take the risk. If there was even a chance that this human could turn the tide, they had to act. Her people were the last of their kind. There was no time to waste. "Where are you?" Tessa asked, her voice sharp with determination. "How do we find you?" The human's voice crackled through the comms once more. "I'm not far. I'm hiding from the AI, but I can't hold them off forever. You'll need to move fast. I'll be waiting." Tessa's heart pounded as she relayed the message to her people. The survivors, still uncertain, gathered their strength. They had no choice but to believe in the impossible. The AI might be everywhere, but this human, this last hope, was their only chance. They had to take it. Tessa stood tall, her gaze steady. "Prepare to move out," she ordered. "This is our only chance. We'll find him. We'll end this war." As the survivors prepared to leave their underground refuge, they couldn't shake the feeling that this mission, this desperate hope, might be their last. The AI would not stop until they were wiped out, but they had no other choice. With one final glance at the broken world above, Tessa and her people stepped out of the bunker and into the unknown, guided by the faintest flicker of hope, a human soldier who had come to save them all. Captain Eric Kane had always been a man of action, a soldier forged in the fires of war. His career spanned across countless planets, fighting enemies both alien and mechanical. Every battle he fought had been brutal, each one testing his resolve, but none had been like this. This mission wasn't just dangerous. It was supposed to be a one-way trip, a final act of defiance. It was meant to be a suicide mission. Eric had been sent to infiltrate the heart of the AI invaders' stronghold, a task so deadly that his commanding officers had given him no backup, no support, and only the most basic of supplies. He had been the last man standing in a battle that had consumed countless others, the only human left in a galaxy under siege by machines. The AI had become an unstoppable force, their technological superiority crushing any resistance that dared stand in their way. But Eric had survived. He had fought through unimaginable odds and made it to the ice core. His goal had been simple: destroy the hub, the heart of their network, and bring down the machines that threatened humanity. But something had gone wrong. A massive explosion, the result of a failed sabotage attempt, had sent Eric's escape pod off course. Instead of crashing into the ice core, the pod had been hurled across the galaxy, its systems failing in the chaos. He had landed on an unknown planet, far from the battle he had been fighting. And now, instead of an enemy installation to destroy, he found himself on a dying world, a place teetering on the edge of extinction. This alien planet, which once thrived with life, now lay in ruin. Its cities were ashes, its people scattered and broken. The remnants of a once great civilization now hid in the shadows, watching their world crumble under the assault of the AI invaders. Eric knew this wasn't part of his mission, but in a strange twist of fate, he had arrived just in time to be the last hope for these people. The very ones he had never expected to meet were now his only chance to take down the AI, and they didn't even know he was here yet. Eric had no choice but to adapt. His advanced cloaking technology, the very same tech he had used to survive in countless battles, was now his most valuable tool. With barely any supplies left, he had to rely on his wits, his training, and his ability to survive in hostile environments. The AI, which had decimated the alien forces on this planet, were still everywhere, patrolling the perimeter of the city with their war machines, relentless, mechanical beasts that seemed invincible. Eric had seen similar forces before, but never in such numbers, never with such precision. The enemy's technology was far superior to anything he had ever encountered. Yet, in the face of overwhelming odds, Eric did what he did best. He fought back. The first time he encountered one of the AI-controlled war machines was nothing short of a nightmare. The machine was a towering metallic behemoth, moving with the grace of a predator and the cold logic of an unfeeling machine. Its sensors scanned the area constantly, looking for any signs of movement. Eric's heart pounded as he crouched in the shadows, his cloaking device the only thing standing between him and certain death. The machine paused just inches away from his hiding spot, its mechanical eyes scanning the ground where he had stood only moments before. Eric held his breath, praying that the machine wouldn't detect him. The tension was unbearable. The slightest mistake could mean his end. But his training kicked in. He remained still, letting the seconds stretch into minutes. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the machine moved on, its attention diverted to another part of the city. Eric exhaled sharply, his pulse racing. That had been too close, but he couldn't afford to dwell on it. He had a mission to complete, and the stakes were higher than ever. The alien survivors, led by Commander Tessa, were his only chance to stop the AI's reign of terror. He had to find them, reach them before the machines found him first. Moving swiftly and silently, Eric navigated the city's ruins, using every trick he had learned over the years. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a survivor. His training had taught him how to think on his feet, how to outsmart an enemy that was technologically superior. Every step was a calculated risk, every corner a potential death trap. The city's once grand structures were now skeletal remains, their foundations cracked and crumbling. Eric slipped between the shadows, his cloaking tech rendering him nearly invisible to the enemy sensors. But the AI wasn't blind. They had a vast network of surveillance systems watching every inch of the city. And as Eric crept closer to the survivors, the danger grew with every passing second. He had to move quickly, but carefully. His chances of making it to the alien hideout were slim, and the machines were getting smarter, adapting to his movements. Every time he evaded one patrol, another would appear in its place, like a never-ending game of cat and mouse. At one point, Eric found himself cornered in a narrow alleyway. The sound of mechanical footsteps echoed through the air as a squad of AI-controlled drones approached. There was no way out. Eric's mind raced, his options dwindling with every passing second. The cloaking device could only work for so long, and the drone's sensors were sophisticated enough to eventually pick up on his presence. He had no backup, no reinforcements. This was it. Then, in a split second, he made a decision. Using a combination of his cloaking tech and a small EMP device, Eric disabled the drone's sensors temporarily. He sprinted through the alley, his footsteps silent, his heart pounding in his chest. The drones were blind for only a few moments, but that was all he needed. He darted around the corner, disappearing into the ruins once again, leaving the confused machines behind. It was moments like these that reminded Eric why he had survived so many battles. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a strategist, a survivor. And he knew that his survival depended on one thing: getting to the survivors before it was too late. The AI would stop at nothing to find him, but he had no intention of making it easy for them. He was here to end the war, not die trying. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Eric reached the outskirts of the survivors' hideout. He could see the faint glow of their base in the distance, hidden deep within the crumbling ruins. He had made it, but his mission was far from over. He knew that the AI would be relentless, and that time was running out. The final battle was coming, and he had to be ready. As he approached the hideout, he prepared for what lay ahead. The aliens were his only hope. They didn't know it yet, but Eric Kane had just become their last chance to survive, and in the face of impossible odds, he would do whatever it took to make sure they didn't lose. The days following Eric's arrival on the alien planet felt like a blur of movement and tension. Every step he took towards the alien survivors felt like a step closer to salvation, but the obstacles were relentless. His cloaking technology had given him a chance, a small opening in an enemy's net, but now he was entering territory where survival was no longer just about avoiding detection. It was about winning trust, building alliances, and facing an enemy that was growing stronger by the minute. When Eric finally reached the bunker, he could feel the weight of the journey pressing down on him. This was it, the moment of truth. The survivors, led by Commander Tessa, had lived in isolation for so long that Eric's appearance felt like a dream, a flicker of hope amidst the endless night. But it wasn't going to be an easy sell. The entrance to the bunker was hidden deep beneath the ruins of what used to be a vibrant city, now reduced to ashes. Eric approached with caution, his heart beating heavily in his chest. The atmosphere was thick with distrust. The survivors had learned, through painful experience, that hope could be a dangerous thing. They had seen their own race's last stand crumble, and now they weren't sure if they could trust the only human to have made it this far. As Eric stood before the heavily guarded entrance, the ground beneath his boots vibrating with the distant hum of enemy machines, he was met with cold, skeptical eyes. The guards watched him closely, and Eric knew that every second he wasted here was a second closer to the Eye's final assault. Yet it wasn't just the machines that posed a threat, it was the aliens themselves. Commander Tessa was their leader, and her doubts could make or break this fragile alliance. The moment Eric stepped into the bunker, he felt the weight of the survivors' gaze on him. They were desperate, yes, but they were also tired. Tired of losing, tired of watching everything they had fought for crumble. They didn't know if they could trust him, especially not after so many false promises and failed hopes. Commander Tessa, in particular, seemed especially distrustful. Her eyes hardened as she looked him over, scanning him for any sign of weakness, any hint of deception. "What makes you think you can stop them?" she demanded, her voice sharp and commanding. "You're just one man. The Eye have tech we can barely comprehend. What can you possibly do to defeat them?" Eric met her gaze without hesitation. He had faced questions like these countless times before, from both allies and enemies. But this time, there was more at stake than his own survival. "We don't fight with tech," he replied simply. "We fight with will." The words hung in the air for a moment, heavy with meaning. Tessa's eyes narrowed. She didn't believe him. Not yet. How could she? The Eye were unlike anything they had ever faced, and no one had ever been able to break through their defenses. Humans were supposed to be weak, primitive, outclassed by the machines at every turn. How could one man, with no army, no advanced technology, expect to make a difference? "I don't have the luxury of trusting you," Tessa said, her voice colder than before. "You're asking me to gamble the last of my people on your word. I can't do that." Eric understood her hesitation. He had been a soldier long enough to know that words alone wouldn't win her over. But he wasn't asking her to trust him without proof. "I have a plan," he said, his voice steady, his tone unwavering. "If you want a chance to survive, we need to move quickly. We'll use their technology against them. Hijack their central command. Take control of their machines. Turn them into our weapons." For the first time, a flicker of curiosity passed through Tessa's expression. She didn't say anything, but the shift in her posture was enough to show that she was considering it. Eric pressed on, his voice low and urgent. "The AI think they're invincible, but they're vulnerable in ways they don't even realize. They'd gotten too confident, and that's their mistake." Tessa was silent for a moment, weighing his words. Eric knew she was considering the implications of what he was saying. If they could infiltrate the Eye's central command, they could disrupt their entire network. It was a risky move, but it was their best shot. And time was running out. "I'll help you," Tessa said finally, her voice reluctant but determined. "But we do this my way." Eric didn't hesitate. He had known from the start that he wasn't going to get what he wanted without compromise. Deal. The next few days were a blur of preparation. Tessa and her team didn't exactly embrace Eric at first, But they couldn't afford to waste time. The AI were closing in, their forces gathering for a final assault. Every minute that passed made the stakes higher, and the tension between Eric and the survivors grew palpable. But amidst the uncertainty, something began to change. The alien survivors, once suspicious and wary of this human soldier, started to see that there was something different about him. There was a fire in him that they hadn't seen in a long time, something they had lost when their world began to burn. Eric wasn't just a fighter. He was a tactician, a strategist, and it was clear that his experience with guerrilla warfare and asymmetrical tactics was invaluable. He taught them how to use their own environment to their advantage, how to set traps for the enemy, how to fight smarter, not harder. Slowly, the survivors began to see the value in his approach. Training together brought them closer. The aliens who had once lived in isolation started to trust Eric, if only a little. The bond between them was fragile, but with each passing day, it strengthened. Eric, for his part, did everything he could to learn from them as well. They were skilled in ways he couldn't even begin to understand, and he wasn't too proud to admit it. Their tech, though alien and foreign, held secrets he was eager to learn. But above all, it was their resilience that impressed him most. The aliens weren't giving up, and neither was he. The training sessions were intense. Eric pushed them hard, demanding more than they thought they had in them. They learned how to move silently, how to disable enemy machines, how to sabotage key targets without detection. But it wasn't just physical skills they were honing. It was something deeper. They were learning to believe again, to trust in their ability to fight back. As the days passed, the alliance between Eric and the survivors grew stronger. They were no longer just a group of desperate individuals. They were a team. And together, they would face the AI. But the clock was ticking. The AI were getting closer, their final assault imminent. There was no time to waste, and no room for failure. In the quiet moments between missions, when the tension in the bunker became unbearable, Eric would remind them all of what was at stake. "We fight for more than just survival," he would say. "We fight for the future." And in those moments, the survivors, led by Commander Tessa, would remember what it meant to hope again. The tension in the bunker was palpable. The countdown to the final assault was ticking, and every second that passed felt like a countdown to their extinction. The AI invaders had all but completed their conquest of the planet. Their machines, vast and relentless, patrolled the land, keeping a grip on everything that remained. Commander Tessa and her alien survivors had no time to waste. Eric's plan was their last chance, the only hope they had to end the AI's reign of terror. Eric, with his unwavering determination, gathered the survivors for one last briefing. He had come to know each of them, their faces now familiar and even comforting in the face of the overwhelming odds. His plan was simple: breach the AI's central command, disable the overlords that controlled the machines, and send a signal to the remaining alien fleets. But the plan was also incredibly risky. The AI's defenses were impenetrable, their technology superior, and their forces overwhelming. Yet, for all their might, they had one thing the AI didn't: human ingenuity and resolve. "We don't have the luxury of time," Eric said, his voice steady and full of conviction. "This is it. We either win or we lose everything. There is no other choice." Tessa stood beside him, her arms crossed, still skeptical, but no longer dismissing his words. She had seen the resilience in Eric over the past few days, the way he fought with a will to survive that transcended logic. It was a quality she admired, but had never fully understood until now. Together, they led the charge through the dense alien terrain, moving quickly and quietly under the cover of darkness. The world around them was unfamiliar, strange flora and towering rock formations that looked like something out of a nightmare. But they didn't have time to admire the view. They had a mission to complete. As they approached the outskirts of the invaders' stronghold, the air grew thick with the smell of burning metal and ozone. The distant hum of AI war machines echoed through the air, a constant reminder of the threat they faced. Eric's heart beat faster with every step. He was used to the pressure of war, but this felt different. This wasn't just another mission. It was the culmination of everything he had fought for. The last remnants of his species, the only hope for saving an entire planet, were depending on him. The weight of that responsibility was immense, but Eric refused to buckle under it. "Stay close," he whispered to the others, his voice barely audible. "We move as one." The alien survivors, despite their fears, had become a formidable team. They had trained hard, learning from Eric's tactics and applying their own unique skills. Together, they had a chance, if they could just make it to the command center undetected. The first obstacle came as they reached the outer perimeter of the stronghold. An army of AI-controlled drones hovered just ahead, scanning the area with their glowing red eyes. The drones were programmed to detect any heat signatures, and Eric knew they couldn't afford to be spotted. "We need to take them down quietly," Eric muttered, his mind racing. He scanned the terrain and spotted an abandoned supply crate nearby. He motioned to one of the survivors, a sharpshooter, who moved into position. With a swift shot, the drone closest to them exploded in a burst of sparks, its red eyes flickering out. The others didn't seem to notice, but the tension was mounting. With precise coordination, Eric and the survivors used the terrain to their advantage, picking off drones one by one. They moved quickly and quietly, always watching for any sign of the AI's patrols. Each successful takedown brought them one step closer to the heart of the stronghold. But as they ventured deeper into the enemy territory, the resistance grew fiercer. The AI had clearly detected something was amiss. The atmosphere grew thick with tension as they encountered wave after wave of AI war machines, massive mechanical beasts designed for one purpose: to crush anything that stood in their way. They were hulking creatures, armed with plasma cannons and thick, armored exteriors that made them nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons. This was where Eric's leadership shone brightest. The survivors, though they had become formidable in their own right, were still no match for the sheer power of the AI machines. But Eric had trained them to think fast, to fight smart. They ducked behind rocky outcroppings, using explosives to disable the machine's sensors before making their move. It was a battle of wits as much as it was of strength. And then, the greatest test of all came. A massive AI war machine, its eyes glowing red like the fire of hell, appeared before them. It was unlike anything they had encountered so far. Towering, armed to the teeth, and relentless. The ground shook with every step it took, and its weapons were capable of decimating entire squads in a matter of seconds. "This is it," Eric muttered under his breath. He had no choice but to face it head-on. The survivors took cover as Eric charged forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He had one weapon, his will to survive, and that was more than enough. The AI war machine unleashed a barrage of gunfire, the sound deafening. Eric ducked and weaved, using every ounce of his agility and speed to avoid the oncoming blasts. The machine was faster than he had anticipated, but he was smarter. He wasn't just fighting the machine, he was outthinking it. He reached the machine's flank, where its armor was weaker. With a well-placed explosive charge, he blew open a panel, exposing the machine's inner workings. For a brief moment, the machine staggered, disoriented by the blast. Eric didn't hesitate. He jumped onto its back, grabbing onto a metal ridge, and used all his strength to pry open its access hatch. Inside, the machine's control systems hummed and buzzed with activity. Eric's breath came in sharp bursts as he fought to disable the machine. The war machine's last attempt to shake him off was futile. Eric's hands moved with precision, his experience with sabotage making this moment feel like second nature. Finally, with a violent wrench, he ripped out the central control core. The machine's limbs went limp, and it crumpled to the ground in a heap of metal and wires. The survivors watched in stunned silence, awe on their faces. Eric had done it. He had taken down the seemingly indestructible machine with nothing but his will and his skill. But there was no time to celebrate. The final push was still ahead, and the AI overlords were waiting. With the way cleared, they moved forward once more, knowing that the hardest part was yet to come. The command center was just beyond the next hill, guarded by the last of the AI's defenses. Eric, bloodied but unbroken, knew this would be the final battle. But now, with the AI war machine defeated and their mission within reach, there was no turning back. The battle for survival had come down to this. Every move, every decision, every life depended on their success. And for Eric, this was more than just a fight for the future. It was a fight for everything humanity had ever stood for: survival, hope, and the unyielding will to never give up. This was the moment that would decide it all. The atmosphere in the bunker had shifted from quiet determination to something far more palpable. The end was near, and with each step, Eric and the survivors drew closer to the heart of the AI invaders' command center. But as they advanced, an undercurrent of fear began to creep through the ranks. The pressure was mounting, and it wasn't just the threat of the AI machines that weighed on their shoulders. It was the growing tension within their own group. The mission had gone smoothly until now. Every move they made seemed to be working in their favor. The AI's defenses were fierce, but they were breaking through. The team had fought hard, each member drawing from their unique strengths and pushing themselves beyond their limits. But even as they neared the final stretch, something began to feel off. Eric could sense it. A change in the air. Something was wrong. Commander Tessa, ever the strategic leader, had been keeping a close eye on the survivors, knowing that their nerves were fraying under the immense pressure. As they moved deeper into the underground complex, the tension became unbearable. Each creak of the old metal floors, every whisper of a movement, felt like it could be their last. But it wasn't just the fear of the enemy that had them on edge. It was the fear that their own people might turn on them. That fear was realized when one of the aliens, Zarek, a member of the team who had fought bravely alongside them, turned on them. Zarek had been quiet for most of the mission, his eyes always darting nervously, and Eric had begun to notice his strange behavior. When they had first met him, Zarek had been a skilled warrior, loyal and ready to fight for his people. But now, something had changed. It happened in an instant. As they reached a critical junction within the bunker, Zarek made his move. The alarm blared, echoing through the halls as the lights flickered on and off. Eric's heart dropped. Zarek had activated a failsafe, one meant to trigger the destruction of the weapon they were planning to use against the AI overlords. The traitor's actions stunned everyone. Tessa's face twisted with disbelief as Zarek, his eyes wide with panic and fear, rushed toward the control panel that held the key to their mission's success. He was muttering under his breath, frantic, as if he couldn't hear anything over the pounding of his own heart. "We can't win. This is the end. There's no way we can defeat them," he screamed. Tessa, in shock, stepped forward, her hand raised as if to stop him, but it was too late. Zarek slammed his palm onto the panel, and the entire bunker shook as alarms blared louder. Sparks flew from the machinery as the weapon's activation code was scrambled. The traitor's desperation had led him to sabotage their only hope of survival. "Zarek." Eric's voice was cold, his grip on his weapon tightening. "You've just sealed our fate." A firefight erupted in the heart of the bunker as Eric, Tessa, and the rest of the team tried to subdue the traitor before he could destroy everything. Zarek fought fiercely, his movements erratic and fueled by fear. It was clear now that he wasn't thinking clearly. In his mind, he was already lost, and he was willing to drag them all down with him. Eric didn't hesitate. He charged forward, knocking Zarek to the ground with a swift, calculated move. The two men struggled, but Eric's experience and skill were unmatched. Zarek, however, was strong, driven by panic and the overwhelming sense of doom that had clouded his mind. As they fought, the bunker trembled again, and the sound of distant marching AI war machines grew louder. Time was running out. Tessa, realizing that they couldn't afford to waste any more time, threw her blaster and aimed it at Zarek, her hands trembling. "Stop, Eric. We can't afford to kill him." Eric paused for a moment, his chest heaving with exertion, as he looked down at the alien who had once been his ally. Zarek's eyes were wide, filled with terror. "They're going to kill us all," Zarek whispered, his voice breaking. "We can't win. We can't fight them." Eric's heart hardened. "You don't get to decide that. You're not alone, Zarek. We fight together." But even as he said the words, he knew that Zarek had already made his choice. The traitor's fear had consumed him. He was no longer a part of the team. With one last push, Eric knocked Zarek unconscious, dragging him to a corner to keep him out of the way. The rest of the team, now fully aware of the betrayal, moved quickly to repair the damage. The sabotage had set them back, but it wasn't too late. They still had a chance. The air was thick with urgency as Eric and Tessa worked in tandem to restore the weapon's activation sequence. The sound of AI forces closing in made every second feel like an eternity. But as the final adjustments were made, Eric knew there was no time left. The team had to move. "We're out of time," Tessa said, her voice tight with the weight of their circumstances. "We need to get out of here now." But Eric wasn't listening. He knew what had to be done. "You go," he said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. "I'll hold them off." Tessa looked at him, her eyes filled with shock and disbelief. "What are you talking about? We need you." Eric shook his head. "You need to get the weapon to the fleet. You need to finish this. I'll hold them off long enough for you to escape." Tessa's face twisted with frustration. "You're not doing this, Eric. We fight together." But Eric stepped back, his eyes locking with hers. "You have to survive, Tessa. For all of us. I'll buy you the time you need. I'll hold the line." Before Tessa could say another word, Eric activated the weapon, setting the countdown into motion. The walls of the bunker trembled as the countdown began. "Go!" Eric shouted. Tessa's breath caught in her throat as she realized what Eric was sacrificing. But there was no time for words, no time to argue. She ran with the rest of the survivors, leaving Eric behind. As they fled, the first wave of AI soldiers arrived. They poured into the bunker like a tidal wave of metal and machines. Eric stood his ground, firing his weapon with deadly precision, picking off soldiers one by one. The battle was intense, but Eric never wavered. He fought with everything he had, knowing that his only chance of survival was to ensure the rest of them made it out. The AI soldiers closed in, their weapons blazing. Eric's own energy reserves were running low, and his body was beginning to give in to the toll of the fight. But he refused to fall. He couldn't. Not yet. As the last of the survivors reached the extraction point, Eric felt a deep sense of peace. His mission was complete. He had done what he had to do. The weapon was activated, the countdown was in motion, and the AI forces were about to face their end. Eric knew that the price of victory was steep, but it was worth it. In his final moments, as the AI closed in, Eric's voice echoed through the comms. "Never forget," he said, his words a final gift. "You were never alone." And then, with a final burst of gunfire, Eric fell, the last stand of humanity's greatest warrior ending with a sacrifice that would echo through history. The weapon activated, and the AI forces were finally defeated. Humanity had won.